Call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission members are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The Planning and Zoning Commission is supported by staff from the city's planning division. The commission is responsible for recommendations on matters involving subdivisions, annexations, master plans, and major site development plans, amendments to the zoning ordinance, and comprehensive plan amendments. We make our recommendations based on city codes, the facts presented, and input from the public. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments regarding the proposed item. Please direct your input to the commission. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker information card and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. The order of the proceedings for each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present the staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all presentations and any comments given and come to a recommendation for city council. The discussion may include further questions of city staff and the applicant for clarification. And with that, we'll move to the first item on the agenda, which is introduction of commission members.
Julie Winter.
Scott Huffman.
Cheryl Moss.
Mike Sullivan.
Matthew Voss.
Kyle Hosworth.
All right, and with that, we'll move to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item 4, approval of the minutes of April 15th, 2026. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the minutes of April 15th, 2026, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And now we'll open it for public forum. So public forum is an opportunity for members of the audience. If there's anything you wish to speak on that's not an item related to an item on the agenda, feel free to step forward to the microphone now. So we'll open public forum. Okay. Hearing none, we'll close public forum and we will move to item 6 on the agenda, rezone for Tabor development at 5120 Tabor Drive from agricultural to suburban residential low density with a master plan.
Good evening. The proposed rezoning is for a roughly 2-acre parcel on Tabor Drive. The property is currently zoned mostly agricultural. A small portion at the west side is zoned floating suburban residential. I should say that the agricultural does not mean that it's row crop or that it's cattle are grazing there. It's merely the base zoning district. So when this property was annexed into the city in 2024, it was designated as agriculture because it needed to be zoned something, and then with the idea that it will be rezoned to something else, to a higher and better use. A small portion, as you can see here, is zoned FSRL. That was a remnant of a previous outlot that was incorporated into this development. To the south is the Lutheran Church of Hope property that's currently in development, and this outlot was created as a part of the church development. The request is to rezone the property to FSRL, which, as you can see, is in keeping with the surrounding zoning to the northwest and south. To the east is agriculturally zoned land. It is undeveloped. It is not used for agricultural uses. The FSRL zoning does require a master plan. And you can see that here. It is very simple. This is not a very large property. The FSRL typically is used for larger properties that have more complex or can have more complex master plans, which is why we end up with a fairly basic one here. The zoning, the density of the units is called out as being 7 to 9. The zoning density, there is a minimum and a maximum density in FSRL, so you could have more units than 9 by the density, but the applicant does not intend to do that. It would also be a little bit difficult to squeeze that many on there. And the comprehensive plan does call for this area and the surrounding area to be residential neighborhood 3, which is designated for expansion areas. This was a recently annexed area. The Sunset Ridge neighborhood to the north and to the west has been developed over the past several decades. It's still on the western edge of Sunset Ridge, is still being built out. And RN3 is largely suburban in character. The FSRL does require a 10% open space as a part of this development. The developer does not need to decide with the rezoning exactly where that will go. It could either go on site, or you could figure out a way to, with the neighboring property to coordinate open space with that as well. But that will need to be accounted for. The property is served by water, by city sewer, by stormwater, by electric, and no right-of-way dedication is required for this development. Staff does recommend approval, or recommend that the commission recommend approval to the council. Wanted to just briefly say on the alternatives. Alternative 1 is with a master plan. Alternative 2 is without a master plan. Just a brief explanation. Master plan, you can opt out of that with council approval, but staff is still recommend, because it is such a simple project. But staff is still recommending alternative A with the master plan. I can take any questions.
Benjamin, so if with the open space requirement, it says that the documentation says they're going to tag on to the existing HOA is kind of the plan. It sounds like. Is there?
He's expressed a desire. He'll have to prove that we haven't ironed that all yet.
Okay.
Ironed all of that out yet at this point. Mm.
Is there a precedent for that, or would this be a precedent making action to approach a existing HOA to use their open space?
I don't know how often that has happened.
It has happened.
Okay.
The Ringenberg PRD in South Ames, there was an apartment development that they bought, essentially annexed themselves into the homeowners association of the single family homes to get credit for the private park and usable space that was there, rather than replicate that on site. So it's happened once or twice.
Okay.
In the last 10 years.
Okay. Thank you.
And on that note, if that wasn't able to happen for whatever reason, then I assume the developer would just need to have the open space available on this site.
Correct. It would have to be designated, and it would have to be common open space is the phrase that our code uses. And so it'd have to be usable in some sort, because this is about a 2-acre property. That would be, a little under 9,000 acres or so, or not 9,000 square feet rather in size. So it would be fairly small, but that would meet the 10% requirement.
I think one of the comments that we had received prior to the meeting was in relation to there's a wetland just south of the area that we're looking at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was some concern. I think it would be great for staff to maybe go over what we as the commission are required to consider with that. I know from my perspective, I'm seeing the proposed developable area to be quite close to the overlap to that wetland. I have a feeling that what we're being asked to consider tonight would not relate to how staff may consider future runoff or future water quality protection or things like that. But I sure would love it if you could just speak to that, because I have a feeling that will come up tonight.
Yeah. So there is the wetland is a technical term, and it comes with a formal designation from the federal government. When the property was when the church property was developed, there was an extensive analysis that was done of the entirety. You can see the red outline is the entirety of the original property. An outside consultant was hired to come in and to study the question of the wetlands. The part at the north end of the pond that's hatched there in green is the only designated wetland. This property, the property in question here is just to the north of that, so it doesn't actually include that little wetland. The part that is, I did discuss this with our engineering division in our public works department, and that area is just the northern part of the pond. So it's water right there. It's very shallow water. And the wetland designation has to do with the depth of the water, with the soils, and with the presence of vegetation there that makes that a wetland. The drainage for this area is not intended to go into the pond. The pond remains. The pond it's a man-made pond. It was built, I don't know, in the 50s or so, and the drainage is actually the on-site retention detention is going to be in a field to the west, immediately to the west of there. That was part of the church development, and when that drainage feature was designed, the knowledge that this part of the property would be developed was taken into account with that as well.
We may hear some additional comments on that, but yeah, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
Is it always the intent to move away from agriculture when it's annexed? And is it always the intent?
I mean, typically when we're not going to annex property that's not going to develop, basically. Yeah, I don't know why we would typically, when property owners come, and this was a voluntary annexation, so the property owner wanted to be annexed, and with the idea that it would be developed.
The comp plan does not have like an ag designation. It assumes either it's open space, green space, or it's developable area. We don't do urban agriculture as a land use in our plan.
Any additional initial questions for city staff?
Maybe to say, my mind is still on the wetland, just knowing that we might hear some things about that. Is there any development standard for a future site plan that may or may not come back to this commission, but for any other staff who are reviewing a future site plan, is there any consideration given to, I believe there's stormwater considerations, which is basically what you mentioned. I know that the Ada Hayden residential area has a certain buffer area that's required to where each parcel has to have a certain buffer area of just different water quality practices. Is there anything that could be considered in this site plan, or will the boundaries be fairly tight based on?
Let's kind of clean up the terms a little bit about what's going on. Okay, so we'll look at the graphic here. This is before Hope started construction of their church, right? So this was part of the application to construct the Hope Church. They have a rezoning with a master plan that keeps the pond and the trees to the northeast as open space. So for the Hope property, which is just to the south of here, that's limited in terms of where they can do development. So the church is down by Lincoln Way, parking to the west. And then, as Benjamin said, that open area to the south of where we're talking about, that is stormwater management area. When that was approved with the Hope Lutheran Church project, it accounted for runoff from the lots that might occur on the Tabor properties. So they already have a stormwater easement, and the stormwater plan is designed to take the runoff from those, whatever lots are approved on the south side of Tabor, into that open area of the Hope property. So when we get to a preliminary plat, not a site plan, since they're single family homes, they're preliminary plat, we don't expect a new stormwater plan because the lots are already accounted for in the Hope stormwater plan. Our engineering staff will confirm the assumptions of impervious and all of those things meet what was there. But the preliminary plat would be the time where you get to see grading and other elements of utilities that would serve future lots here.
Will this come back to that commission, or will this just go to council? Or just staff?
So the whole development process, you're here for a rezoning process. You'll make a recommendation, which will go to city council probably at the end of the month. And then once the zoning has moved forward, the developer will come back with a preliminary plat, and then there'll be a separate hearing with the commission and the city council to consider the proposed lots
Got it.
for this project.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions right now? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll invite the applicant, if the applicant's here, to come up and make a statement regarding this agenda item.
Keith Arneson, 4114 Cochran Parkway here in town. I own a construction company. It's called Pinnacle Properties. And while I have been in Ames since 1978, I founded the company in 2003. I do land development and new home construction. I've developed over 260 single-family lots in Ames and 4 or 5 subdivisions. Most are, I would classify them as infill. It might be considered new lands. The reason I bring that up is most of the places that I have developed in town are not large parcels at the very edge of town. Most of them are. I did one in Hillside on Mortensen. I did a piece by the hospice house. I'm doing 2 communities now, one in the north and one in the south off of Oakwood Road. So most of the times that I've gone into these areas to purchase land for development, I have done so knowing that there are houses fully developed on at least 2 sides, many times 3 sides. So this is not a typical. I'll get into it a little bit more, but I wanted to talk a little bit about, some of the higher goals that the council have that maybe would explain a little bit about what it is I'm doing here and what we're all doing, talking about this particular topic. So anyway, the 2 communities I currently have going are called Damani Courtyards, and they're plus 55 communities. One is the one on Oakwood Road, and Cottonwood will penetrate through it too. That is 63 lots. And the one I have in the north, I did not develop. Kurt Friedrich developed it. However, I did buy 50 lots in that, and I'm building out those developed lots. I just want to take a little bit of a big picture on this. Like I said, in 2005, there were 240 building permits issued by the City of Ames. In 2017, after the Great Recession, I think we all understood that 2006 might have been the very tail end before a bubble popped. I think we all remember portions of that. 2017, which is after the recession but before COVID, is considered more of a normal time, and I think most of us are looking back to that time thinking that might be the benchmark. There were 125 building permits issued. In 2024, and I picked that date specifically, that year, there were 59 building permits issued. We did a few more last year. I believe 68 was what we ended up with at the end of the year. The city council goal, if you look at the goal listing on the website for the city council, on February 10th, they adopted the goals. The second goal was longer than this, but the gist of it from the standpoint of what I do is it's increased the quantity of new construction housing. This was the same goal that they had in 2024 when we reached the bottom of our historic low, I guess, relative to building permits. It was also on there in 25, and I believe it was on there prior to that. I only went back a couple of years, but it's currently on their list of goals. In 2024, the city council, I assume, acting on one of their goals, adopted tax abatement for single-family homes. It's a 5-year sliding scale. It's historic legislation. It really hasn't been done here, to my knowledge, on this sort of a scale. Most help is going directly to the new home buyers. And then in 2025, the city council adopted a development assistance program to bring more lots to market. That was assist developers. Some developers out there just develop and don't build. Many people out there build and don't develop. And then there's a few of us that do both. And I'm more of a niche or a boutique builder. I normally am that smaller package, not the 160 acres, not the third generation guy. So, but anyway, that went to help the developers and the buyers by increasing inventory and choice based on the type of lot or housing that ultimately would be developed there. Brings lots to builders who don't develop their land in-house. The city manager prides himself on cost efficiency. I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand, and I assume you share some of those goals. That's one of the reasons that our property taxes are as low as they are. My request will not require a street or the infrastructure that goes into that street for the most part. There's some shut-offs and some things going to the individual lots, but in general, the infrastructure is already there. So when you look at what the city has to pay in the future, they're really paying most of it. What they have to do that street, they would have had to do anyway because the street's been in existence for some time. Any snow removal, anything that happens like that, the city is already taking care of that. Only they're doing it on what you call a single load street, which means there's a street there with houses on one side and not on the other. Not a very efficient way to develop, and it's somewhat rare. Infill land in general, I talked a little bit about, but the city does not have to extend or oversize infrastructure to the edge of town. So I believe that there is a desire by the planning staff and the city council, and I assume you folks, to try to develop as efficiently as possible, and infill is certainly one of the ways to do that. And I think most citizens agree that developing an undeveloped parcel of land inside the city, within the city limits, is a wise use of resources and reduces sprawl. So that's the big picture on it. The small picture is this is a much smaller development than what I normally do. The 5 lot, what I will be bringing back to you in the future, so there's no surprises. We're talking about 5 to 8 lots in here. The first 5, if you've driven the site at all, you will see that during the Hope Church development of the ground and grading, the first 5 lots have no trees on them. And I know I've talked to I have gone out in most cases, not in this case because the size is so small. I've gone to the neighborhoods in advance of bringing my plans to the city or to a body like this. And I've talked to people and try to make sure they understand what it is that I'm trying to do, and ask them, what we can do cooperatively to make that happen. In almost every case, the first objection that people have on an infill site is, please don't change my view. And I understand that. I get it. I live in town. I live near trees and things I wouldn't want to lose, or near, if you're living near an empty field. But at the same time, I think it's hard not to say that if that looks like a natural place for housing within the city, that it will remain undeveloped forever. The second question I hear invariably is absolutely no apartments, nothing near my house. It's multifamily. And I've respected that in everything that I've done. The most that I have ever put into any community of the 260 lots, there might be a dozen or two twin townhomes, which is kind of a modern version of a duplex. I've done a few of those, nothing larger than 2 units with a common lot line. So I've tried to respect the wishes, because that is such a strong feeling, and because I can't do anything about the first one. I won't obstruct their view, but in all likelihood, I will obstruct their view. If it's just a green space, if it's not tall trees, I probably will obstruct the view. But the second piece of it, I've always tried to take into consideration. And it's much more lucrative to develop multifamily than it is single family, much more. In most communities, one of the reasons that infill is difficult is that it's often a space left over between single family and very low density and extremely high density, large multifamily buildings, 12 plexes or larger. And so I understand what people are saying, and I get that people don't like, nobody likes change, particularly they don't like change that affects their view. I get that. At the same time, knowing that there are larger objectives afoot that I am trying to, abide by and bring products to this community that I think we'll be proud of long-term. I take a lot of pride in the products that I produce. And hopefully if you drive through any of the things that I have going on, you would see that. But anyway, I don't want to go on any longer. I just wanted to let you know that there is the big picture, and then there's the view of what it is that I'm eventually going to do with this parcel. Any questions?
Any questions for the
Thank you for
applicant?
listening.
Thank you. Okay, well then at this time, we would invite members of the audience, if they would like to come up and speak on this agenda item, we'll open the public comment period on this. Please come up, state your name, your address, and if you haven't filled out the speaker information card, please do so. We'll open public comment now.
Do I need to fill out that card first, or?
I think you can introduce yourself and your address, and then you can fill it
Okay.
out after, that's fine. Yep.
All right. Yeah. Thanks so much. So I'm Jonathan Clausen. I live at 5119 Tabor Drive. So I'm right across the street from that orange plot that is trying to be built. So I have here in hand a neighborhood petition. So I went to all the homes that were in the 400-foot buffer area and talked to them about what's being built. And everyone I talked to does not want this built, but wants to preserve it as green space. We as residents are very concerned that it is, as you can see, the orange spot is right there where that little green wetland was. And all of that land to the west of it is a drainage area because that is part of that wetland and that drainage. So we do believe we do need that buffer zone to keep that area part of the Clear Creek watershed clean. And we believe that it can be a valuable resource for this community to have that green space. There could even be pathways in there so that people can enjoy it, but also to keep nature in our city area. We don't just want to be short-sighted and keep building when we already have a wooded lot, a creek there, a pond that we can take advantage of and make that as preserve it. So I think it's really short-sighted to try to keep building right in this slot when to the north and to the west of the slot, there are a lot of homes going in. So the Sunset Ridge community already has over 300 homes, 32 that were built this last year. There's plenty of single family homes in this area, and we don't need to have 5 or 8 new ones right here where it is a green space. So I do have concerns about that, and concerns that because it is on that wetland, have we really gotten the right regulations? Section 404 of the Clean Water Act may require a permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, in addition to other state and local approvals. I don't think the City of Ames have gotten those approvals yet, and I would ask them to make sure we have those approvals even before any building could be possible, and really to check that land again, because we do believe it is a valuable wetland space and should be preserved. So everyone I knocked doors on and got positions from, they did sign. Some people were not home, so I didn't get their signatures, but I can attest that everyone in this community does not want this building to go forth in that 400-foot buffer zone. So I could hand this to you, the petitions with the signatures.
Yeah, we can,
Okay.
I think we can accept that. Right?
Yep, you can
Yep.
pass it out if you want, and
Yep.
Okay.
pass it around. We'll give it to the clerk.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I'd be happy to take questions, but I'm a professor here at Iowa State University, and a lot of us have long-term careers here, so we're going to be staying in this community for long-term. So we really want to see this community grow and have this space that people can use and preserve our nature. I guess that it. Okay.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
Should I sign this here?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else from the audience that wishes to come speak for public comment? Okay. I guess at this time, then, we will offer the applicant and the city staff the opportunity to provide any rebuttal or comments or any answer any things that were in the public comment.
Staff doesn't do rebuttal. That's a question if you want the developer to speak again.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak further? Okay. In that case, we'll close public comment. Are there any concluding remarks from city staff?
I want to be clear about the wetland. If you could put that graphic back up. There is no filling of the wetland. It is off-site from this property. It is also not a jurisdictional wetland under the U.S. Corps of Engineers process of evaluating those. That was determined as part of this study. So again, it's not on site. It's not being filled, so no 404 permit would be required by the developer. The city doesn't get permits. We're not doing the work. The developer is doing the work. So if there was a fill of that wetland, which again is off-site, that would be their requirement to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers to get that permit.
All right. Thank you. All right. Well, then at this point, we'll open it up for the commission for discussion.
Do we have any documentation available to us? I see that we have one map that has a topo overlay, I think. It sounds like we've done the proper studies that would require the drainage to go west, as you described, Kelly. Is that correct? The drainage is going to not go into this pond or wetland, or
The
how?
Hope Detention Facility is not the pond. They have a separate stormwater facility to the west of the pond.
Okay.
And then from that, it gets, I don't know how the stormwater system works after that when it just leaves the site. But the treatment is within the detention facility.
So is that something that we should consider at
So zoning,
further
so
along?
zoning isn't typically looking at site details because you don't have a lot layout. You don't have any improvement plans to do that. So at this stage, what you're really looking at is what lands are developable, not how necessarily they would be technically developed. That would be the preliminary plat on the technical side of how it's graded and how the improvement plans are done for that.
Can the commission provide any comments up to this point to recommend something be considered for the site plan? Is that appropriate, or?
We don't really recommend
only-
things for the plan. I mean, keep going. I guess I don't
Yeah,
understand your
I mean,
thoughts.
my-
I'm not sure where
My
it fits.
general thought is that we have a lot of folks in this neighborhood who see the value in this area. And I agree with the developer that we can't save everyone's views. I agree with council's general goal of needing to provide more infill areas. I am uncertain how we are protecting this natural area. And I feel like we've come upon this several times in the past couple years that we aren't looking at the entire scope of development in our purview. I just really wish that we would have some development standards that would put in required conservation practices, at least at the developable level, maybe not enforceable past that. But so does that make sense?
I guess I'm not 100% clear because we do have mandatory stormwater management standards. The subdivision code has all of the standards for platting
Okay.
about lots and public improvements and grading. So that is
Okay.
the item that would address those technical details. And the city has multiple codes that the Public Works Department and the Planning Department review
Okay.
to ensure that you are not degrading the environment
Okay.
because of the development. So
Okay.
those things are built into our codes. You just don't see them at zoning because it's really a use question,
Right. Much less the engineering side.
not the engineering side of it. So
Okay.
you did reference contours. They're very light on here. The southeast corner has more slope to it. The west 2/3, including some of that tree area, is relatively flat. So again, the developer has said, they would consider, not me, they would consider a lot anywhere on that orange area and haven't proposed to set anything aside. When we get to the preliminary plat, if they are annexed to the Sunset Ridge HOA to account for open space, because there is a lot of open space within the Sunset Ridge subdivision, then there wouldn't be any mandatory in the orange area. But if that is not done, then the preliminary plat will have to show set-asides for what that is. And I think, as the developer said, he's pursuing 5 lots immediately, and he's not proposing lots. I don't anticipate him proposing lots to the east part of that site right now. I don't know when or what he would do in the future, but that's not his immediate objective based on what he said tonight.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like just my personal thought is that I could get behind this for the general thought of needing to provide more infill development opportunities in town. I do hope that we can provide a good level of information just to the general public about the questions that came up tonight. But I think in general, I'm in support of it. I don't know what others think or.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. It will be interesting to see the preliminary plat, and hopefully that can answer some outstanding questions. But yeah, from the zoning perspective and the, I guess, purview of this recommendation decision, I mean, I think it makes sense to continue to move forward with recommending the rezoning.
What do others think? Anything to add?
I'm along that same path, and I've
Okay.
been this whole time. Like I think the zoning makes sense. That aspect of it. Again, the details will come later in the preliminary plat and the master planning. I did go out to the site. The contours that are shown here on the west half of that site aren't accurate to what's there currently. I'm assuming it happened in the previous development of the site, but there is the grade. I could go up there and trace it, but they've already kind of graded out where presumably the first 4 or 5 of those properties would be. And it looks by that it would kick the water away from the pond there and to the west, as it seems intended in that overall master plan. So I wouldn't get too caught up on details yet of this grading, because I think you can see where they've started to strategize for that.
Got it.
When the master plan comes, it'll be interesting, because I think the east half of that site's going to be tricky to develop, but obviously that's not what we're discussing today. We're discussing the zoning today, and the zoning part seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
Did want to just clarify something quick, probably with Kelly. Rezoning this requires the master plan, which exists. It's just a little light on some of the details, correct?
So
Because
again,
it's
in
small.
terms of light,
So the green space and the minimum on the density, right? Isn't that what Benjamin said earlier?
because they're only proposing one housing type, detached single family homes. Some of the bigger sites have multiple housing types.
Okay.
And then they also show set asides that aren't maybe fully engineered or specific, but where things really wouldn't be disturbed. In this case, because stormwater is being accommodated offsite, the developer chose to show all orange instead of any set asides.
Okay.
But when we get to the plat, that's where you have to conform to zoning. So
Okay.
the master plan's conceptual. It does matter what the unit count. You can't exceed the unit count in the master plan. It is binding if it's approved. I think we noted that in the staff report, because gross area and net lot area isn't all decided yet. The minimum range might be different, but the max would be absolutely set
Okay.
by this.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
So if the commission was requiring a set aside of open space, then that would be a condition to add to the master plan. That is not what's been proposed, though. It'll be accounted for at the plat.
Any other discussion or comments or questions? Okay. If there isn't any, would anyone like to make a motion on this agenda item?
I would move for alternative 1.
I'd second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for alternative 1. All in favor of alternative 1, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. All right.
As I said earlier, this item does need to go to city council. I think we do believe it would be on the May 26th meeting. Benjamin says yes. So there will be another notice for that meeting for those that are watching or participating in this process.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, rezone of properties located at 3299, 3312, 3699 East 13th Street and 1699 570th Avenue from planned regional commercial PRC with the Northeast Gateway Overlay OGNE and a contract rezoning agreement to PRC and OGNE without a contract rezoning agreement.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. Justin Moore. I'm one of the case planners in the planning department. The item that you see here is for the entire property that is shaded in red there. That is zoned planned regional commercial with the Northeast Gateway overlay. And the owner of the property is requesting to have this rezoned. And what that means in this case is that it is being rezoned to the same PRC zoning designation with the Northeast Gateway overlay. But we are removing the contract rezoning agreement from 2005, along with a master plan that came along in 2006 for a regional mall that was proposed to be built here. So some of you may or may not have been in the community and remember that 20 years ago. The current landowner has indicated they have no plans to construct a regional mall. And so they would like to remove that contract rezoning agreement with the master plan and maintain the PRC zoning along with the Northeast Gateway overlay. Real quick, just to kind of hit the highlights of the agreement. We talk about that in the addendum. The agreement primarily put expectations on development timelines of the north and south sides of the site, so north and south of East 13th. There was also some requirements of the previous landowner who proposed the mall at the time of seeing financing and leases and things like that for the regional mall proposal, which again has been gone for quite a few years now. We do discuss some other details in there relative to the land use supporting the current zoning, the community commercial retail land use that's currently on this site, which supports PRC, was put in place by Ames Plan 2040 4 years ago. So that is obviously still in place and will remain in place. And OG&E has expectations for any type of development that would occur here, particularly with regard to aesthetics, general layout. It also has expectations on protecting Kettleson Marsh to the north, which will stay in place. So what this is really doing tonight is getting rid of that contract agreement and the master plan that was approved back in 2005 and 2006. So with that, I can take any questions more specifically on it.
So it sounds like, am I correct, that there's not really a specific plan or intention in place as of right now for the site? It's more just removing this would allow for plans to be developed.
That is correct, yes.
And I think you mentioned too, the proposed zoning matches what's in the comp plan, correct?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Planned regional commercial would still allow for a shopping center. However, if anything new is proposed, that would have to start back through staff and go through a process.
Great.
Yep.
The only other thing I wanted to add, and we said this in the report, is that the OGNE overlay, we're keeping it, but there will be text amendments to it. It was very much written about the regional mall project, and a lot of the standards and processes won't make a lot of sense if we get rid of the contract rezoning, which is likely to happen. So you'll see a companion text amendment kind of simplifying what the overlay is. The overlay is really a big part of it is protecting the Kettleson Marsh land to the north. There's some buffer requirements in there, and there's some other site design and architectural standards that you would just expect go along with a commercial development. But a lot of other stuff in there really isn't going to be necessary if you're not doing them all.
Getting rid of this contract would also get rid of the public benefit component of it, the Cyride contribution and the bike path along 13th Street as well.
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
So take that back a little bit. So when site development occurs, frontage improvements would still occur.
Okay.
There was a number of off-site improvements that the mall developer agreed to that were going to go back west. We wouldn't expect those to happen, but frontage improvements of the property would still be required.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for city staff? Initial questions? Okay. At this time, if the applicant is here, they wish to make a statement, they can come up and make a statement on this agenda item.
Good evening, members of the commission. Chris Murray, President and CEO of Denny Elwell Company, developer, 2401 Southeast Tones Drive, Ankeny, Iowa. And I'm just here tonight to answer any questions that any of you might have or provide any type of clarity.
Any questions for the applicant?
Hearing none.
All right, seeing none. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'll invite members of the audience. If anyone in the audience would like to speak on this agenda item, please step up to the microphone, state your name and address, and if you haven't already, fill out a speaker information card. All right, seeing none, we will close public comment. Or does the applicant or city staff want to make any concluding remarks?
Nope.
Okay, we'll open it up for discussion then for the commission.
This one seems pretty straightforward, I think.
If you're willing to entertain a motion,
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, I motion that we approve alternative 1. Do I have to read that whole paragraph, Kelly? Okay.
Second.
All in favor of alternative 1, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And we will now move on to item 8, which is review of the bylaws.
This is just an annual process we go through. It gives everybody a chance to look at them. If there's something that's been an issue in the past year, you could motion for an amendment to be prepared. We would not approve it tonight. It would be drafted and come back at a future meeting if there was a proposed amendment.
I don't think I can think of anything that we've had issues with recently that
Asking staff, is there anything that has stuck out to you in the last year for the new members here that might need to be addressed? Or
I don't. The issue that sticks out is beyond the Planning and Zoning Commission. The question of virtual participation. It's required by law to let all the commissioners participate. That's fine. City policy is that staff is the only other virtual participant. We don't typically allow for applicant or public participation. We just don't have it set up that way.
Sure.
There's likely to be a city policy about that. So it doesn't really need to get addressed, I don't think, in the bylaws about that. So it's been, I don't know if we've had one with the commission. It's come up once or twice with council or the ZBA in the last couple of years. But that's the only thing that kind of comes up that's not really spelled out clearly yet.
I would assume that city policy supersedes the bylaws just automatically at downward, or
it would probably depend on how it was adopted.
gotcha. Okay.
I had a question about the rebuttal. If it could be clarified, perhaps by just adding that rebuttal from the applicant, that's under public participation. It says, therefore, a short rebuttal time shall be allowed to provide for new information only. And that, to me, that's a little bit confusing about who's doing the rebuttal.
Article 8, Section 2.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if,
And
if
would
that's
that
something.
be in the form of just questions from the Planning Zoning Commission, or is it another chance to speak on that part of that?
No, so let me kind of talk through how it's supposed to go, how it's really supposed to work. Maybe it isn't clear in here. I think the whole process is not spelled out, but the bylaws do insert this public participation component. So the way we typically do it, staff is presenting the application. We're rarely applicant. Sometimes the city's the applicant. When the applicant gets their time to speak, they get to they get to say whatever they want to you and make their case for their project. Then the public comes up. Staff does not rebut the public. There's not a dialogue with the public with staff. There's not a dialogue with the applicant either, right? It's supposed to be comments to the commission. I think we've had some challenging meetings. If you want to know one thing, we've had some challenging meetings with keeping the structure of addressing the commission rather than staff. Staff can meet with people after meetings to go through questions. That's not a problem. So this is for the applicant. If someone came in and said, these things about the property are whatever, the applicant is supposed to have a chance to say, no, that's not the case, or this is how I would address that. That's supposed to be their rebuttal to public comments is really what that's about. Staff really shouldn't be rebutting. I mean, there can be, we really don't even correct. I know I addressed the wetland question a little bit here because I think that was just, there was a lot of talk about that one thing. When someone suggests that the city has to get a permit, I just want to clarify that wasn't us, just for the record. But typically staff is not trying to correct or rebut public comment. That would be really the commission saying, staff, we heard this, and then asking staff a question rather than staff picking and choosing what we want to say about a public comment. It should be the commission asking questions if they want to about a public comment that maybe staff can answer. So if you want to clarify that in the bylaws that the rebuttal is about the applicant, I can understand that.
And the applicant, and it does say it shall be allowed to provide for new information only. Is that, I mean, how do we control that then?
Well, the chair would say, just please stay on new information. Like you wouldn't want someone again come back and repeat the same 10 minutes that they just got done with, right? That's the point of that.
And how do we how do we avoid
the chair?
Like I think in the last meeting, a little bit of like the applicant did say, I'm happy to meet with the public in a different format, and then had what controls do we have over how long that can go? And I guess it's the chair.
The chair has the prerogative. I've worked in other places where it's said up front, you have 3 minutes as a public to speak. So the expectation is set, and then like the mayor, like I'll give an example from the city council. So sometimes they set a time limit, sometimes they don't, but the mayor might interject and say, it's been 7 minutes, can you bring it to a close? So that's the chair's prerogative if they think that it's getting out of.
And the chair could say to the applicant, please address only the new issues or the new information.
Correct. If they're starting to just rehash things that have already been stated. And I don't think we have applicants typically doing that,
No.
but that'd be the chair's prerogative to ask them to move on.
I think Cheryl's point is a good one though. On the actual text of the section is a little nebulous, and it could probably be like the public shall be allowed to address comments to the commission of the said item versus participate in the discussion does give a little bit more of a sense to me, at least, of like a back and forth. I think that I guess I'd be interested to hear how other people read that, but that's my first thought reading it. Like a discussion to me implies a back and forth. So
Yeah, and the back and forth sounds like we're afraid of an argument, and if we want the public input, but our position is not that of answering questions or having a discussion with the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth clarifying this section.
So if there was a motion to direct staff to prepare language,
Yeah, I would move to ask staff to prepare language for Article 8, Section 2, just clarifying public participation, how it works, addressing the commission versus a discussion, and also cleaning up the rebuttal time from the applicant.
I second.
Yeah, so before we vote, I was just gonna say, like, I agree. I think some clarification on this would be good. I do think it's a good idea to allow some flexibility in the language versus very strict language that the chair would need to follow. I think allowing some discretion to allow something rather than a very black and white, cut and dry, absolutely you have to follow this. So I guess I'd be in favor of that. I'm gonna vote in favor of this motion, I think, but I would
As far
encourage some, still allow some flexibility for the chair.
Flexibility with interactions with the public or the applicant or the staff or.
Well, I think this one's about the public. So I mean, I would just say allowing some flexibility in the language, not that it's so restrictive that there's no ability to allow some flexibility or some discretion.
Like not saying specific times or specific.
Not putting that in the bylaws.
Yeah.
I think having the flexibility for the chair to, I mean, that can be dependent on the number of people in the meeting that look like they're going to comment or different aspects of that, I think.
Yeah, and that was never my intention.
No,
was
I
to
know.
have it be
Yep.
locked down. I think there's definitely a lot of discretion and nuance that goes into this, but I think having the terminology clarified a little bit better would be
Absolutely.
good.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion or the second here?
No.
Okay. So all in favor of the motion on the table here, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
We did something on our ballot.
not yet, not yet. All you did was direct something to be prepared.
Yeah.
We directed it.
The drama of the 2/3 vote is yet to happen.
We got pretty close there on that vote to that 2/3. So I'm concerned.
Wait until you get your first 4-2.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Are there any other thoughts on the bylaws, I guess? And any other things that we feel strongly about or want to discuss?
No, I think they look great.
Okay.
So you might notice on the last page, it has a directive to yourself.
Cities, the comprehensive plan.
Yes. So we're nearing that. I don't have any particular work plan direction from council to do that yet, but I would say maybe later this year, probably for sure by next year, we would do that 5-year, just check in. We're not planning to do any particular update, just to check in, see what people think. How's it working? Is there any tweaks that need to be made? So that's the intent of that 5 years. Is there any dramatic shift in anything that should change what's in the plan? So we're at that point, but I don't technically have any direction to do that, but the commission has their own bylaws to ask for that as well. So I'm asking basically hold off a little bit until later this year before you ask for that. But it is time.
Great.
Okay. All right. That brings us to commission comments. Anybody have any comments?
Is anything happening next time?
Yeah, I think we'll have that OG&E text amendment, and I believe there might be another item too. I don't recall right now, but probably.
Okay. Any further staff comments?
I don't.
Okay. Well, then we'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Does anyone have a motion?
Move for
to-
adjournment.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.